From talking to a lot of people who have not released their plugin yet, there's a lot of common fears they have that seem to be stopping them from getting started at all. Things like your plugin not being good enough to even be released. The answer is pretty obvious. Are you or someone else, say a client, able to use your plugin to save time or make the site better in some way? If yes, then definitely the plugin is good enough. Your plugin doesn't need to have every feature imaginable to be good enough to be released. Actually, the less you have in it, the better. It's easier to maintain, it's easier to support, it's easier for people to use, it isn't bloated with a bunch of stuff only a small amount of people will ever use, and it's easier to market and explain to people. Another fear is taking down people's sites with your plugin. You're going to release your plugin, people are going to install it, their site will break, they'll be super angry, and they and the rest of the world will hate you forever and ever. The truth is, no matter how much testing you do, there's a good chance there may be a conflict with your plugin and another plugin or a theme at some point, or you'll miss some use case of the plugin that you didn't think about. There's a few easy ways to get over this fear. The first, test your plugin. Give it to at least a couple people to test on their own sites. If it works, there's a good chance it'll work for everyone else. The next is to be responsive and available, and don't ignore people if they have an issue, which is probably not something you were going to do anyway. Even if the issue is your fault, by being there and responding to any reports that you get, most of the time people will be more than reasonable and patient with you. You can have a warranty notice in your plugin's main PHP file or in a license.txt file. If you open up most plugins, chances are you will see a warranty notice saying that essentially there is no warranty. By having this, in the worst case scenario that someone wants to sue you, there will be a clear notice that suing is not really an option. And by simply saying you only support your plugin on a clean install of WordPress, you'll be able to avoid issues with other poorly written plugins or themes, even if you do everything you can so that your plugin works nicely with them. Another big fear is support. That the support of people asking questions, wanting new features, and generally needing help will take over your life. This is pretty rarely the case, but it certainly does increase as the amount of people using your plugin grows. One way of dealing with support is time blocking, basically limiting when you offer support and using a separate system for handling support that's out of your main inbox. It's a lot more efficient than answering support emails immediately as they come in and helps it not take over your whole day. We'll go over this later in the course. Another is setting expectations. You've probably seen a little blurb at the top of a plugin in the WordPress.org directory saying support for free is only offered, say, 1 day a week between certain hours, or priority is given to those with paid licenses. A simple way of setting expectations helps people know what to expect and what you'll offer, and if there's something that's totally unreasonable, you can either not respond, say if it's your free version, or you can give them a refund if it's pro. On the pro version or for email support, you can even have a quick little autoresponder that tells them what to expect in terms of response times. From the fear of taking down sites, you can also say you only support your plugin on a clean install of WordPress. I've got a saved block of text basically telling people to disable all of their plugins, switch to one of the default WordPress themes like 2016, and see if the problem still exists. If it does, then obviously I need to sort that out, but usually it's because of another plugin. So then I say to re-enable them one by one and find out which one causes things to break. If I have time or it's a really common plugin, I can look at fixing that conflict. Otherwise, they or I will need to reach out to that plugin author and tell them to stop maybe queuing their script on my options page, outputting white space when they shouldn't, which messes up the header, or whatever the issue might be. You don't need to support issues with people who are using poorly written plugins and maybe have 80 or more of these random plugins installed. Also, you only need to add new features when you want to, not based on the demands of your customers or free users. I've had people ask me to send them the exact CSS and HTML for their super unique use case, and I just say no. Find someone to do that because my plugin doesn't do that, and I never said it did. Other times, it's an awesome idea for a new feature that I never thought of, and I add it in right away. They're super happy, and now my plugin is better than before. But you don't have to add new features based on requests right away, and you can just keep a list of ideas to work through when you have time. Just to see a recent example of a request I got on the forums for one of my plugins. Sounds like they wanted me to make a new plugin that does some other thing that isn't at all what my plugin does. So I just ignored it, or even better, marked it as not a support request and moved on. One other common fear is that you can't do this on the side, and it's going to take too much time to get started and keep it going. And it's true, it can take a bit of time to get things going and moving things forward. But even dedicating a bit of time each week adds up pretty quickly. And by setting expectations and restrictions on support and when you add new features, you can put as much time into it as you want when you want. You absolutely can release and keep a plugin going on the side, and it's obviously a lot less risky that way than just quitting your job, stopping doing any consulting or freelancing, and focusing on a plugin they haven't proven yet. Another fear is that maintenance will take a ton of time to do. In a later module, we'll go through a more sane release process to avoid some of this. And if you are doing your best to do things the quote-unquote WordPress way and are not getting any warnings with WP debug turned on, oftentimes keeping your free version up to date will be a quick test on the latest version and updating the tested to WordPress version in the README file. One last fear I hear from a lot of people is the fear of people stealing your plugin. The quick answer is, it doesn't matter. Ignore it. Focus on actual paying customers. Inevitably, people will steal your plugin, and that's fine. They probably weren't going to give you money anyway, and you can avoid supporting those people by adding a quick box in your contact form like this. That license key box doesn't even need to check to see if it's a valid license key or not. It just gives you a quick way to check if you want to, and you have a feeling that they're not a paid customer. Now that we've squashed some of those fears that might be holding you back from releasing your plugin at all, one last thing, if you don't have a plugin already, is coming up with an idea. If you already have a plugin or a plugin idea that you've committed to, you can skip it and move on to Module 2. But it might be worth watching it regardless if you're not totally sure.